A warm welcome to everyone to our tips today for prepping for the waiver season webinar for J-1 physicians. I'm very proud to present Jan Pederson. She brings over 35 years of experience. She was key to establishing several very important J-1 waiver programs in the late 1980s, and she has been honored with the Lifetime Achievement Award for her work with J-1 waivers, representing thousands of physicians, right? And she has worked tirelessly with the US Congress. This work continues even today. In fact, right after today's presentation at a sharp 1 p.m. end time, Jan will be meeting with a senator on Capitol Hill to streamline the medical perm green card process. So we do apologize ahead of time for the hard stop at 1 p.m., but rest assured, it is for a good cause. I'm Benjamin Hu. I'm a former journalist and turned current immigration attorney, and I'm honored to have worked with Jan and her team on dozens of J-1 physician cases. While we still have a few more guests coming in, I'll run through the disclaimer real quick. The obligatory disclaimer. This presentation today is provided for informational purposes only. It does not constitute legal advice, and it does not create an attorney-client relationship between Right Constable and Skeen and any participant. Any opinions expressed through this presentation are the opinions of the speakers only and not of the law firm. This session will be recorded, and it will also be available at wcslaw.com under Educational Resources category Immigration Law Talk with Jan Pederson. So without further ado, it is my pleasure to introduce our doyen of J-1 waivers, Jan Pederson.
Thank you so much, Ben, and thank you to all the wonderful physicians, employers, recruiters, and State 30 people who are joining us today. I certainly hope that your road to a waiver job will be paved with gold, green cards, and happiness. And we're here to give you some tips on how to make that happen, and we're always willing to help you make that happen. We represent physicians, employers, recruiters in the green card and J-1 waiver process. All of you, please feel free to put your questions in the chat box. We will answer all that we can. If we do not get to your questions, we will post the answers to your questions online. So as Ben said, we have a hard stop at 1 hour because I have to run, jog, somehow fly. They haven't sent a helicopter yet from the office in Bethesda to Capitol Hill. We're having a meeting with the senator regarding streamlining your green card processes. We're going to deal with green cards at one of our later seminars this year. So I'm going to make this fast. I want to have a shout out to all the amazing State 30 and federal agencies who work so tirelessly to process waivers, bringing doctors to medically underserved areas in their states. Also want to shout out to all the amazing J-1 physicians who saves lives every day and are our unsung heroes very often. I have to give you a warning that I have just come off of binge watching the wonderful Netflix show, The Resident. So I'm all prepared for all that you do, as told by Netflix. Next. So we want to look for a waiver job as an opportunity for the future for you and your family. Don't look at it as a 3-year prison sentence. It is what you make of it. So if you think it's a 3-year prison sentence, you will show.
The prophecy will come true, right?
The prophecy will absolutely come true. You want to own your waiver, get involved with your community. They need you. They spend a lot of money to get you, and they want you. Always go where you're wanted. Warning, don't ever take a job out of desperation from your cousin Vinny. If your cousin Vinny doesn't need you, that probably won't work out. So your job search, start early and apply nationwide. Do not limit to the search to a very few places. I see this over and over again. Somebody wants to live somewhere for whatever reason. Say, I'm only going to look in Baltimore. Okay. You tell the employer in Baltimore, I only want to work in Baltimore. All right. So you've narrowed your options and possibly the amount of money the employer is willing to offer you in that. Okay. So how do you get an interview? There are lots of people out there competing a job, but I will say again that there are plenty of waivers to go around. You just need to find the job that fits your needs. So how do you get an interview? Well, many of your attendings can give you tips, or your prior colleagues to say, where are their jobs? Most of you are on the J-1 Physician Facebook page, where people announce where there are jobs and where they know about them. So one of the things that I have seen over the years as getting an interview, you want your resume to stand out. Okay, so most of them come in black and white and whatever. So you want to have your resume stand out. I always recommend putting a color photo of it with you smiling and looking like a doctor. Okay. Now, if you have a very long name, recruiters tell me that adopting a shortened nickname that you use may result in you getting a call back faster, because in fact, CEOs have over the years told me that they're embarrassed if they can't pronounce your name. So you want them to be able to pronounce your name. So email and snail mail your resume. Okay, so now you've got an interview. All right, what do we do next? Okay, if your job is in a rural area, take your spouse and children, if you have any, to the site visit. Before you go, research your community and its leaders and find out what the hot button issues in the town are, what matters to them, what they celebrate. Ask to have lunch or dinner with the medical staff. Ask to see the schools if you have children. I wouldn't recommend you ask to see schools if you don't. It might look a little weird. Ask to meet the civic leaders, religious leaders, real estate agents, and bankers. Remember, you want the job because you want a waiver and a green card and security for your family. But in those rural areas, the mayor is going to love having you there. They want bragging rights. Hey, we recruited a GI. That gives them bragging rights. They want to have their doctors in your town. You add value to the town. Don't forget that.
Global draw, right?
Global draw,
Right.
exactly.
And now, if we were to interject here, any practices to be aware of? Anything to
Well, my
avoid?
favorite one is I had a physician who was going to interview in a wonderful place called London, Kentucky. So I asked him what London, Kentucky was for. He said, I don't know. Well, London, Kentucky is the home of Kentucky Fried Chicken. Once you know that, redo a little research. A minute or two of Googling will tell you what matters in the community, who's the mayor, who's the banker, and who the important people are. They all want to meet you, by the way. So take a couple of days, meet all of them. You will find it often very welcoming.
So reach out beyond the job, reach out to the community, put roots.
Yes, dress appropriately. It's all there on the slide. Wear a navy blue or black suit and tie for men. For ladies, choose a navy blue dress suit, model navy blue heels, and a pearl necklace and earrings. I have that on. I'm not going to job interview today. Next. All right. What do you ask at the interview? So you've done your research. You hopefully have researched the medical community, what's going on. Things you want to know about in this day and times is your nice, wonderful freestanding hospital in a wonderful place about to be bought by a big chain, and your bosses are no longer going to be in wherever, Altoona, Pennsylvania, but they're going to be in Nashville, Tennessee. And I've heard that at least 3 times in the last 2 months. The doctor signed a waiver job a year and a half ago, went to work last summer, and lo and behold, they were bought. What do they do now? So you need to find out all that stuff that's going on at Google in the newspapers, talking to people around the hospital. Now, what to do at your interview besides be really nice and friendly, and don't be nervous, really. Just stop it. They want you. That's why you're there. They paid for you and your family to come to an interview. So if you have a spouse, and if you have a spouse who wants to work, ask about job offers for your spouse in the community. Over and over, I find people are reluctant to ask about this. Am I asking too much? Am I being greedy? Is it going to risk my chances of getting the job for me? In many instances, employers will go out of their way to help your spouse find a job, including arranging for a physician spouse who has not done a residency to find a residency slot in the area. That way, the community gets two of you if they help your physician spouse do a residency. Up front at the interview, ask about green card sponsorship policies, when they're going to start the policy, who's going to pay for them. Certain processes must be paid for by the employer, such as the H-1B process and the green card through PERM process. There are many other processes they don't have to pay for, but ask them anyway. Many of them will. Any are self-petitions, physician national interest petition, national interest waivers, and EB-1As. Also, if you're married to an American or a permanent resident, ask if they will pay for that process, as in fact, it is to their benefit, because if you're getting a green card through a spouse, it saves the employer much time and money rather than sponsoring you through an employment visa. And at your interview, tell the employer what you're bringing to them in terms of academic and work experience, special expertise, lives you've saved. A lot of you have done residencies in another country before coming here. So in fact, that employer gets 2 for 1. So if you did an anesthesiology residency in India, the UK, you come here and you do the anesthesiology again. So he actually gets an anesthesiologist with 8 years experience. Tell the employer that. Also, if appropriate, it's not always appropriate, but maybe your attendings can give a courtesy call to the prospective employer before the interview. Okay, and then after because you've already researched the community, tell the employer the volunteer work you and your spouse want to do. If you're an oncologist, tell them you'd like to be active in the county or the state cancer society. If you're a cardiologist, the same. That shows you're interested, and oh, by the way, follow through with it. So things that doctors could and should do in the communities: participate in health fairs, serve on the boards of civic and medical organizations, give seminars, very important, give seminars to the nursing staff and other allied healthcare professionals on subjects. Remember, you know a lot, so it's not going to take a lot of time for you to put together a seminar on the latest techniques or medicines and so forth. Now, my favorite thing, and people who have managed to do this are very, very happy in their communities. I'm focusing here on rural areas. It can be done in urban areas too. It's just a little bit more impersonal. So every little town has a radio station or a TV station, and they're always looking for content. And remember, again, you all know a lot of stuff. Call the doc, talk to the doc. We had one client who was a pediatrician who started a baby talk show, and it was call in, and you're a hit, you're famous, you're invested in the community, people recognize you, whether you want to be recognized at the grocery store, walking down the street. It's all very personal and wonderful if you can do that. And I'm sure and it's also great for marketing. Oh, I want to go to that doctor. I saw him on TV.
And also as a purely immigration viewpoint, if there's media coverage of you, the doctor, that
Yes.
also feeds into other potential visa categories for high ability too.
Exactly. So doing your extraordinary ability petition, you got media exposure that can help later down the road. Absolutely. Okay, what you don't do. By the way, I just didn't make all this stuff up. I've been talking to employers and physicians and recruiters for 35 years. So I learned this stuff from them. Okay. And also I've been an employer and an employee. So I took that experience and rolled it into what not to do. Don't start the interview by asking how much vacation time you get. I am told that people actually do that. First or second question. Don't do the work-life balance demand. This is a double-edged sword. Depending on the job, know your community, know what you're doing, possibly they don't, the work-life balance, that's kind of a turnoff. Because if you think about it, everybody has work-life balance. It just depends on the mix. Okay, definitely try not to tell them you really want to move to the area because you have family there. Okay, you may just have lowered the salary if you're only willing to work in the areas I mentioned before where you have family. And if your family is your seventh cousin, the employer will wonder why you really want to move to the community. I mean, it's a my cousin Vinny kind of thing. Okay, and don't advise the employer that you want your first act in office or on the job to be a long vacation abroad. We do have the situation now, we're getting into it in this year's waiver season, what day they want to start work, and find employers overall are pretty flexible on that. But you don't want to say, I want to take a 4 months vacation. I haven't been home in a couple of years. Yeah, you probably weren't be the first applicant on their list. So try to avoid those things. Everybody really knows that everybody else wants a work-life balance. It's not necessary to say. And the accommodating employers and the good ones will make sure you probably have all that you want. All right. This is my favorite one. And please, if you're going to interview in a rural area, or isn't New Jersey the most famous state for diners?
Yeah.
I think diners started there.
Yeah.
I think they're basic. Anyway, mix, mingle, and socialize. That's where you're going to get your real idea about what's going on in the town. Have breakfast at the local diner. Yes, that's where the folks gather and get ready for the day and talk about what's going on. They will find you and talk to you at the diner. So we're kind of all used to being in paranoid big cities. You don't even know your neighbors and you don't ask their name or whatever. So, but that's not the way they are in rural America. They're friendly and they say, oh, who's the stranger here? And they'll be friendly. So that's a great way to find out what's going on. They'll introduce themselves. They'll ask you a lot of questions, which you're not necessarily accustomed to. But this is your opportunity to connect and find out what's going on. Oh, Farmer Smith might have heard that, his cousin told him that the hospital's being sold next year. Okay, well, that's something you want to look at. The hospital deal may not be done, so it's too early for the hospital to mention it, but folks hear it. All right, so you want to insist on meeting the medical staff, nursing staff, and other workers at the hospital. There you can learn a lot too, and you want to get a sense of the work culture, the friendliness of people, the environment. So that's really an important skip. Don't skip that step. We've had cases where number one rule is do not do a fly-in or fly-by interview. That means sometimes employers, for various reasons, and you say, oh, that's good. I only have to spend a day there. My work schedule is very busy. Take the time to visit the community. So when an employer may say to you, fly in Friday night and fly out Saturday afternoon. Well, like, what are you going to see on the weekend? That should be a big red flag. All right, the next one I've already covered. Find out what the hospital's up to and what they're going through. And hospitals often don't like to be sold any more than you want them to be bought. So find out what's going on politically. Okay, now we get to this lovely contract. Before you get to a contract, you very well might have a letter of intent. So you want to go on for that. Know your contract word for word. Have an immigration lawyer and a physician contract employer review your contract and explain it to you. Some of the contracts are so complicated, I don't understand them when they get into these big, complicated formulas and RVUs and XYZs. No. So if you don't understand the RVU system that your prospective employer uses, figure it out, ask questions, have your lawyer review it. And this RVU thing, it's on my mind today because I've gotten 2 complaints in a week that people's jobs were being threatened because their employers said you're not doing enough RVUs, and it's a whole story. So you want to get straight on that. However, whatever the RVUs say or don't say, remember that for the H-1B and the underlying labor condition application, which is obviously the precondition for you to go to work once you get the waiver, the Department of Labor doesn't want to hear about any XYZs or RUVs. They want your base salary. They can put whatever they want on their base salary. That's what it's going to be. If they ever come knocking on your door, all the Labor Department or USCIS wants to see is the labor condition application and the H-1B petition. That will determine whether you're being paid the proper wage. Now, they can calculate it in RVUs, but ultimately the government wants to see a base salary.
And that magic number is a salary of do not go below, right?
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. That's a great question. I had a question yesterday. A guy started his waiver job. Employer came and say, we need you to sign a supplemental contract. And by the way, since your RVUs aren't high enough, we want to reduce your salary by 10%. And he wanted to know if that was okay. And that is not okay.
So a raise is fine, but a
raise is fine, but a drop cannot be dipped below that offered wage, except in narrow circumstances. Ask the staffing levels to be provided. How many nurses, how many MAs, how many this, anticipated call schedule. A warning there is you sign the contract in, September of 23, and you're going to go to work July 24. Things evolve in the workplace and staffing levels may change. So an employer is going to be reluctant to put in and anticipate a definite call schedule because things change. They can put in what they anticipate now, but they don't know what the situation will be like on July 1st, 2024. Tail insurance, don't leave that out. That is if the employment's terminated, who's going to pay the tail insurance, which is the insurance for during the time you were working there. All right, so the contract, all important, but just the thing about a contract. In the waiver world, you've got your contract, and that's fine. We're all familiar with them. They permeate all of our lives. But in the waiver world, your waiver employment contract plus the H-1B rules are going to govern and somewhat supersede that. Next. All right. I'm going to debunk your myths and send you some of this wonderful Ben and Jerry. We're Ben and Jan, but Ben and Jerry's ice cream. All right. There is a shortage of waiver slots. There is anything but a waiver slot, a shortage. There are an abundance of waiver slots. More than ever, and our fellow attorneys work very hard to increase the agencies which will give waivers and making them all very user-friendly for you and your employers. So I'm just going to run through the programs. In our next discussion, we'll go into them in detail in our next webinar. So we've got 2 types of programs. You're all familiar with the Conrad State 30 programs. It's been around since 1994. And that permits each state to give 30 waivers to 30 doctors per year. Of the 30 waivers, each state at its sole discretion can use up to 10 of those 30 waivers for physicians who will not physically work in a medically underserved area, but will serve patients who reside in such areas. And again, that depends on the supply of waivers in a state and the demand. If a state gets 50 waivers for medically underserved areas, you're going to have a tough time getting one of the 10 waivers not in medically underserved areas known as flex slots. So real quick, HHS, we love HHS and they're wonderful, not in all contexts, but our waiver contexts. During COVID, they expanded their program to make it very user-friendly. They will grant waivers for primary care in shortage areas, which are known as health professional shortage areas, HPSAs, with a shortage score of 7. And just so you can look all this up, just Google find shortage area by address. Type in the address where you're contemplating working and see if it comes up as a HPSA or the other basket is MUA. There are two kinds of underserved areas: HPSA, health professional shortage areas, and MUA, medically underserved areas. There's also mental HPSAs too, but we don't know how to go into, we won't go into that now. So we've got HHS, then we have the Appalachian Regional Commission, ARC. The websites there will tell you which geographic areas are included. So geographically, the ARC roughly includes parts or all of 13 states, which run along the Appalachian Mountains. They are the most cumbersome of all the waivers that we do, federal or state. They have a lot of rules. The processing takes longer. And it's coming to the point where some states require you to file with ARC if you're eligible for an ARC waiver and not to use the state 30. So that one of them is West Virginia, New York. There are several others. You don't have the option. So a lot of employers say, well, I want to use the state 30 because they're more user-friendly, less paperwork. And if they have a rule in the state by state saying, no, if you're eligible for federal one, ARC or other federal, you have to use that. The next one, which we love, is the Delta Regional Authority. Again, a geographic HPSA. They will do both HPSAs, MUAs, all medical specialties. By the way, I forgot to say ARC does only the HPSA areas, the HPSA basket. DRA roughly runs along the Mississippi River from the bottom of parts of the states through which the Mississippi runs from the southern Illinois down to the Gulf of Mexico. They are fast processing. HHS is fast processing. The next one, which is a new one, which came into effect in, I believe, August 22, is the Southeast Crescent Regional Commission. SCRC.gov. They're wonderful to work with as well. They do have a $3,000 filing fee, and they cover a lot of they cover all of Florida, which made all our doctors wanting to live in Florida extremely happy. Most of Georgia, parts of North Carolina, South Carolina, parts of Virginia. Now, the one that just came online, the newest one, is the Northern Border Regional Commission, or actually Northern Border Commission, nbrc.gov. That covers geographically the counties that run along the Canadian border in Maine, Vermont, New Hampshire, and New York. The great news is that taking pressure off of the New York Waiver Program, as you probably already know, that New York State received twice as many waivers as they can accommodate. So that will move some of that away from that. The thing never to forget is all federal waiver programs are open year-round and can issue an unlimited number of waivers. For example, HHS received over 300 waivers last year. The other important distinction, state 30 programs have flex slots and federal waivers do not. It must be in either a HPSA or MUA as dictated by the program. So take your flavor from there. A lot of people do consider what waiver program they would come under when choosing a job. We are happy to sort that out with you. just give us where your jobs are and we'll go from there.
So speaking about these different federal programs and the state 30
Yeah.
programs of the states, are there any programs you've seen recently which come out head and shoulders as the fastest ones for the least delays?
Oh, yeah, without a doubt, HHS. However, that brings us to the next problem because in our waiver pipeline, we have the federal or state agency with whom the waiver application is filed. They will make a recommendation to the Department of State Waiver Review Division. They then make a decision and send it on to USCIS for final approval. So 3 steps. Footnote there, ARC and the Northern Border have 4 steps because they make the applicant file the waiver application with the state health department. They have them review it. When they review it, then they send it to the federal program, either the ARC or Northern Border. We don't like that. It's an unnecessary step, but so far we haven't gotten them to eliminate it. Now, just a warning for those of you who are already in the process and hope to start work July 1st. The waiver process has created a choking bottleneck. Expedites are difficult to come by. They apparently don't have July 1st marked on their calendar as all of us do as the day you can start work if you have your waiver and your H-1B approved. So there is going to be a huge delay in getting your doctors to work this year. How much, we don't know. We're working on process, but please, if any of you can help, any of the recruiters here, employers, doctors, federal and state agency people, get on the State Department. There's really no excuse for creating a delay. And during COVID, the first 2 years of COVID, they were very helpful streamlining the process. But we're looking, at big delays in starting work. And if you need to be here legally during that time, we also have a solution, some workarounds to stay here legally while your case is being delayed at the State Department. They are under recent new leadership, so we're somewhat hopeful that the priority of your waivers will change to being top priority, but anything you can push, talk to your congressmen, your senators, state, federal, everybody. Say, why is there a delay there? In fact, and in reality, and they wouldn't like me saying this, but their job is ministerial. Did the state or federal agency give them the paperwork they need? Can they read all of your DS 2019s? It's pretty straightforward process. We have advocated the SCAN project that all of the state and federal agencies scan and email your applications because even in the best of times, the waiver packages sent by the state and federal agencies to the Department of State got stuck for weeks, sometimes months, but more like 2, 4, 6 weeks in the anthrax mailroom while they checked them out before they even gave them to the waiver review division. So please help us out and help you out so we can get you to work because it's looking ugly for this year. Next. Okay, Jen, your general waiver requirements. Okay, so you got to have a employment contract to provide direct patient care for 40 hours per week for 3 years. Generally, most waiver agencies want you to exclude travel and on-call time from the 40 hours. They want you to be touching patients. Okay, just a little on the joke side today. We got an email from one state saying that some of them don't like to do waivers for pathologists, radiologists, whoever else doesn't touch people. Of course, if you're a pathologist, you're touching a part of a person, but anyway, question comes up, is a pathologist doing direct patient care? So far, the answer is yes. Some states will not prioritize pathologists, radiologists, non-touching specialties. Okay, everybody's got to show they try to recruit American physicians for varying periods of time. Some are 6 months, some are less, some it varies, and they are negotiable. If you're this is a true story. If your two doctors, orthopedic surgeons, went on a boating trip together and they both drowned, you lost your two orthopedic surgeons. So it would be unlikely that the states would say, oh, no, you got to do advertising for 6 months or whatever. So it is flexible. I should say thank you to the state people and the federal people who are overall most wonderful. All right, so you got to state that you'll treat all patients without regard to ability to pay. You all have that in your programs, basically. Just saying, that's not how they show it on the Netflix, The Residents, but anyway. We actually have had two universities back out of waiver jobs because they couldn't state that they treat all patients without regard to ability to pay. That comes up very infrequently, but I'd say in the last 2 years, it's come up twice. So the waiver didn't go through it. Most states prohibit non-compete clauses. Beware, sometimes it's a deal killer for the physicians on the line. A non-compete clause is not wanted by doctors, is often wanted by employers, and basically says, if you don't work for me, you can't work within 25 miles of the job location practicing medicine for X number of years. The good part about that is on the state and federal level, they're moving to abolish non-compete clauses in employment contracts, period. Briefly, I want to leave we got a lot of questions here, a few minutes.
Mhm.
All right, no non-compete. Some require liquidated damage clauses. Those are just purely offensive to physicians. It assumes the ARC has it. Delta has it, but it can be waived and everybody waives it. Basically, it says if you don't work for the doctor, if the doctor doesn't work for the employer for 3 years and it's terminated within the 3 years, you get to pay your employer $250,000 if the transfer conditions are not met. Rarely enforced, but very off-putting and very insulting to our hardworking doctors that they assume that if something goes wrong with the employment, it's the fault of the doctor and maybe he has to pay $250,000. Okay, this comes up every day of the week, a million times. Most waiver programs prohibit the physician from terminating employment without cause during the 3-year period. Causes a lot of questions, issues after employment. We don't have time to get into the weeds on that today, but we'd be happy to discuss how you can deal with that prohibition in your case. Next. Okay, here's some quick red flags. There are many others. See the red flag over there? Okay. The boss tells you aren't generating enough revenue, seeing enough patients, etc. This could be a red flag. Like New Amsterdam and The Resident, you can tell what I do at night, watch Netflix medical shows. All right, so remember, the corporate practice of medicine today often squeezes your direct employer and you to produce more with less and to put patient needs last, sadly enough, many times. So, you might not want to hate your immediate employer for saying work harder and faster. Reality, they may be getting pressure from a much higher level than they are. Red flags are attempts to reduce compensation below that which is promised by the employer on the labor condition application and the H-1B. All right. Being put on a personal improvement plan, that's a kind of an ugly thing. This is often an employer documenting a basis for firing you. If this happens, consult an employment and immigration lawyer immediately. Sometimes when the practice is sold, where are you in the mix? That you need to contact attorneys to discuss if that's a reason for you to leave, a bona fide extenuating circumstances in your particular situation. Next. More warning sign. Reluctance of employer to accommodate maternity leave. Self-explanatory. If you really think you have to leave. It's affecting your mental health, your family life. If it's unbearable, you have to document extenuating circumstances to justify a transfer to another position. It's not done lightly. It's expensive. It's anxiety provoking. So that's why we really want to make sure your first job is really the one for you. Next one is just my experience. Smaller, locally owned employers are more likely to be concerned with your well-being and accommodate your needs. Bigger the corporation, the more employees they have to worry about, and they have to make sure that every one size fits all. Okay, so if you need to leave the job, start applying for a transfer job because you need that in hand. So my advice is no job is perfect, so try to make it work. Next. So here's some bonus tips. I hope you like that beautiful graphic there, which Julie, our graphics person, did. Okay, here's what's going to make your life wonderful. Integrate into the community. Invite the boss and their spouse to dinner and share your native cuisine with them. They love it. They will talk about your Nepalese cuisine for the next 6 years. Volunteer in the community, time permitting. Again, we already said give seminars on topics within your area of expertise for the nurses. They will be most grateful. Please, please, please listen to the nurses. The rule is if the nurses don't want you there is not whether you will leave, but when. Always make sure the nurses are your friends. Okay. Understand the equality of the workplace in America. In theory, do not pull rank on subordinates, conveying the attitude that you must be listened to because you're the doctor and they are not. Rather, focus on earning their respect. That will make you have a wonderful work experience. All right. This one's kind of funny because I'm a girl. Slide into the old boys network in the community. Learn the sports that the CEO likes: golf, tennis, organize staff appreciation nights, movies, type of drinks, karaoke. Oh, yeah, okay. Bring cookies and donuts to work occasionally or whatever healthy snack you want to do. And if you care about your patients and the staff, it will show. If you don't, that will also show. Beware of the smart young doctor syndrome. You can get run out of town on a rail no matter how good you are. That is for real and for true. You're all trained at top programs in urban areas in the United States mostly, and you know a lot. And you go into town in a rural area, and old Doc Jones, who's been practicing there 50 years, hadn't been to a continuing medical education course in 40 years. And he doesn't like the way you do things. You have up-to-date modern things. And if you get on Dr. Jones or Smith's bad side, you are going to be kicked out of town. We've had it happen a few times. Okay, when you go into town, pay your respects. By a personal, in-person introductory visit to the established medical community. Old Doc Smith really appreciates a new doctor in town stopping by to pay his respects. That will be the start of hopefully a very good relationship. All right, that ends our formal presentation. We have a few minutes for questions. What's the first one?
Here we go. So we have
Ben.
There's a question: is getting waivers for surgical specialties harder? For example, waivers for vascular surgery. Is it better to do a waiver after completing general surgery, or rather to finish fellowship before applying for a waiver?
Great question. The answer is you have to look at the job market. What is the demand for vascular surgeons versus general? And it's all about the job opportunities. If there are job opportunities, I would generally recommend finishing all your all your training and then jumping into the workforce. Obviously, the more training you have, the more limited your job opportunities are. So if you have 3 subspecialties of surgery, you're going to have to go to a bigger area where they can support your specialty, and try not to settle for a general surgery job. If you're a vascular surgeon, I can guarantee you will be miserable. Next question.
How do you know which practices qualify for the J-1 waiver? For example, the elements of underserved area, payments plans for uninsured, accepting Medicare, Medicaid, and so forth.
Great question. You go to, do you want to put it up on the screen? You just Google HIPAA assigned by address. Corey, just put it, HIPAA assigned by address.
Let's see if we can find that.
No, just type it in the chat.
Okay.
Okay, if you go to the HIPAA assigned by address, you type in the address of the proposed work location, and then a chart will pop up and it will tell you. Now, a note there is that it will have dental health, underserved areas, mental health, primary care. Okay, primary care includes all specialties. So people call and say, I can't find interventional cardiologist on the list. There is nothing. The primary care list is used for all specialties. And then within that, when you look for primary care, it will have a shortage designation number. And for an HHS waiver, you will need a HIPAA score of at least 7. I hope that answered.
Question of that. How early should J-1 physicians begin their job search?
Probably now. I would say in the spring of 2024, if you're going to start in 2025. But don't rush and sign the first thing you see, please.
So that's just to begin, not to finish.
Yeah, exactly. Okay. See what's out there.
Specifically regarding Canadians, is it possible for employers to file a petition to switch a physician from J-1 to H-1B status while the HHS J-1 waiver is in process?
Yes, to refine that, the Canadian citizens, we've got very special rules for Canadians. One, while the HHS waiver is pending, you can't file a change of status application in the United States to go from J-1 to H-1. However, you do consular border processing, you get the approval, and say you're going to drive in through Peace Bridge in Buffalo, you just take your approval notice and come in, and you can work on the H-1 pretty much forever, but you probably do want to get a waiver because you need one in order to get a green card. Next question.
Can you give some examples of states which are hesitant in supporting non-touching medical specialty waivers like radiology, pathology, and so forth?
Washington State, my home state. And then others have other rules, but I wouldn't be deterred. I think I would stay away from Washington State because it's very hard to get one there. They don't think pathologists play a role in healthcare. Next question.
Can a person apply for both the Conrad 30 waiver and the HHS waivers simultaneously?
Absolutely, totally, 100% not. You may only have one state or federal interested government agency waiver pending at a time. And every waiver application requires that the physician say they have no other waiver pending. That said, however, you may simultaneously apply for the other kinds of waiver, which we aren't going into detail today: hardship, persecution, and a state 30 or federal. You just can't do a state and federal simultaneously. You may withdraw the application if it doesn't look like it's going to work out, and you have to clearly withdraw it before filing, or you don't get a waiver in another state, you want to go to another state.
So you could have one waiver saying this U.S. state really wants me to work there, and another waiver saying if I go back home, it's a war zone, it's just too dangerous, I cannot do that.
Exactly.
Okay. I think we have time for just a couple more questions. So one should be straightforward. As a pediatric nephrologist, does that qualify for an HHS waiver as well?
Absolutely not. There is a little footnote. So as you know, well, maybe you don't know, during COVID, the wonderful Mike Berry at HHS said, I'm going to open waivers to the entire country as long as the work location has a HPSA score of 7 or greater, and the physician is not more than 1 year out of a primary care residency. So they only sponsor primary care, and you have to start work within 1 year completing that primary care. So where does that come up? Comes up with people who have family medicine and then do a year of palliative medicine or whatever subspecialty that's a year. So that can be worked on, that can be handled, yes.
Can a physician travel before their J-1 waiver job begins?
Can or should. In this tumultuous world, we strongly recommend for most people that they do not travel until they get H-1B status.
And then
And you
finally,
should probably have permission from your employer.
oh, absolutely. And then finally, to tie us back into how early to start looking for a job, how early should a physician hire an immigration lawyer before graduating from fellowship?
Well, first of all, since hire an immigration lawyer, more like you might want to have consultations with the lawyer. You probably don't actually need to hire one until it looks like you have a firm offer and go from there. So basically, we do consultations, go through various job offers. So definitely consultations. I'm not sure. I mean, we wouldn't undertake representation until a job was identified. And usually, fortunately, I think we've educated our clients to what to look for. So then they would come back once they got the contract.
Well, thank you very much for your insights today, Jan. I know that we would love to have you here for longer, but unfortunately, we don't want to impinge upon your important meeting
We
with the
have time for
secretary.
a couple more questions.
Do we have more questions we want?
No, but I would like to tell everybody about our next sessions, which are going to be on
May 1st.
May 1st on May Day and May 22nd, and we'll be doing going into the waiver process in more depth. We're available for consultations. Next question. Who usually pays for the immigration lawyer? Great question. Historically, it's virtually almost always been the employer. So there are two parts of the process, the J-1 waiver and the H-1B process. No question, but that the employer must pay the H-1B legal fees and U.S. government filing fees, with the exception of a premium processing fee, which can be paid by either party in most cases. Now, the J-1 waiver, in the last few years, we've actually been seeing cases where the physician and not the employer paid the J-1 fee. So there's two fees, the J-1 waiver fee, the H-1B fee. H-1B fee, always the employer. J-1, in most situations, either can pay. So prior to the last 2 or 3 years, I hadn't really seen it at all, but now I'm seeing even big hospitals and universities are telling the physicians to pay the lawyer. Okay, and so we always love to get paid, of course. Now, what's really embarrassing is that USCIS just increased the filing fees for H1s, for premium processing astronomically. So now we're in the embarrassing position that USCIS gets more in filing fees than the lawyer gets, but that's the world.
For somebody who's finished a fellowship and is now doing another residency, is that qualified for HHS in the subspecialty?
Yeah, fellowship, then residency, and if the person is going to work in primary care and HHS believes that it may be possible. At the moment, I'm actually waiting for an answer from HHS. I have exactly that situation.
Is telehealth allowed for waivers?
Oh my goodness, Karen, how do you ask such a hard question? there's probably been 5 or 6 forests torn down with all the paper, the emails back and forth among the lawyers, the agencies. There are a lot of nuances into it. Is the doctor sitting in the underserved area or is the patient? I don't think USCIS, to my knowledge, has not given an opinion on that. If both areas are underserved, I think people should use their discretion. The point is, we're trying to deliver healthcare to medically underserved folk.
And we say both areas, mean the area where the patient is located and also where the practitioner is located. Both
Exactly.
okay.
Where the doctor's located and where the patient's located. If both are underserved, I wouldn't worry about it too much.
If a J-1 visa is denied, can the same person apply for an O-1 instead?
Yes, absolutely. If the J-1 waiver is denied, you can apply for an O-1 visa. O-1 is for physicians of extraordinary ability. You want to document the case. USCIS at the moment, in the last couple of years has been quite generous. However, beware the bridge to infinity. We call the O-1 visa bridge to infinity because many times the doctors are dying to be in a particular job where there are no waivers. For example, New York would be a good example. They get, I don't know, about 60 applications for 30 slots. So then there's 30 doctors who are running out of time and they want to get O-1 visas. O-1 visas must be sponsored by the employer, initially approved for 3 years. But our concern with that is that will it go on indefinitely? Not that employers are bad. They're good people, but they have, okay, I've got this doctor here on an O-1 and I need 3 more doctors. So I'm going to use the waivers for the ones the new blood coming in, and I don't want to waste a waiver if somebody's working here. That sounds harsh, but it's human nature. It's not that they're being evil. They're trying to meet their needs, their physician needs. So I'd be careful about going on it. I think our record is we had a doctor on an O-1 for 13 years before she finally got a waiver. That was Pennsylvania, by the way, in case anyone cares.
And that 13 years, that's before that's separate from it before any per country waiting lists that might apply for.
It was before she got the J-1 waiver. Yeah.
Final question. Is a no objection statement necessary from a foreign government if the study is done in the U.S. Medical College?
It's not needed at all for a J-1 waiver unless there was home country government funding. So it's actually not needed.
All right. And that brings us nearly to the top of the hour. Thank you very much again, Ms. Pederson.
Thank you all for attending, and we look forward to seeing you at our May 1st one, and send us any questions you have. Have a great day, and I'm off to see the senators to try to get you green cards without going through a PERM certification.
All right. Thank you so much. Take care.
Pleasure. Thank you all for attending. Great.